boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater.
Greetings and salutations, creature lovers. This is Mr. Venom, welcoming you to episode 35. Before we start talking about this month's movie, let me go ahead and introduce my cohorts. First, coming to us from the Horror Countdown podcast and Fresh Cuts, it is Mr. Don Anelli. How you doing, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
And coming to us from the main show, No More Room in Hell, it is Mr. Derek B. How the hell you doing, Derek?
Hey, been watching some film noirs lately, especially this movie we're talking about today. Very noir-esque.
I found myself talking in a very noir way as well over the last couple of days.
I was just doing Humphrey Bogart impressions for half the fucking week at work, and everybody's looking at me like, what the fuck are you doing that for? No idea.
Well, folks, let's go ahead and explain what Derek and myself are talking about. This episode and the next episode of Creature Comforts are actually going to work in conjunction with the next episode of the main show. So what we've decided to do is we are doing two OG, obviously, we're doing creature features on our podcast, but what we're doing is we're doing two OG classic creature features over the next two episodes, and then we will be discussing their remakes on the next full episode of No More Room in Hell. So as you already know, today we're going to be looking at Cat People, 1942 from RKO Pictures. And, of course, we'll be looking at the 1982 remake starring Nastasia Kinski on the main show, No More Room in Hell. If you guys are interested in what the second movie will be and want to get a head start on your homework, the next episode of Creature Comforts for March, we will be looking at the original The Fly, starring Vincent Price. I believe that one's coming to us from 1958, somewhere in that range. Of course, we will be looking at the Jeff Goldblum body horror masterpiece
remake. Must go faster.
Yes, must go faster. So, it's, like I said, this episode and the next one, we're going to be working in conjunction with the main show. Look for our friend Mike Merriman to join us on the next episode of Creature Comforts to get his thoughts on The Fly. And then, like I said, we'll have our follow-up thoughts on the remake for both of these films on the next episode of the main show, which hopefully you will hear sooner than later, scheduling, permitting. So. Yeah. Before we get into this month's movie, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history that led up to the making of this movie. Now, for those who don't know, in 1941, RKO Pictures decided that they wanted to get into the horror game. They were seeing all of the money and critical acclaim that Universal was getting for their monster universe, obviously started the decade before with movies like Dracula and Frankenstein. So RKO decided to bring in a little-known producer named Val Lewton.
Yes.
And they basically tasked him with creating a monster universe for RKO Pictures. Basically, there were only 2 or 3 caveats to the making of these films. The first was that RKO would only be providing him with the titles, not a script, not a treatment, not actors, literally nothing. We're giving you a title. You take the title and you make whatever movie you can make. The next part of it was the budget. Basically, Val Lewton was given $150,000 to make these movies for RKO. For those interested, Val Lewton ended up making 6 movies for RKO, 6 horror films specifically, starting with Cat People and then ending with another Cat People movie later on, which maybe we'll discuss on a later episode. But so like I said, he was given a title. Usually it was a 2-word title, something like Cat People or Leopard Man, and $150,000 and basically told, here, go make a movie. And then the last thing that RKO told him was the movies had to be no longer than 75 minutes long. So an hour and 15-minute long movies, which, I kind of like. They're short, yes, by today's standard, but sometimes a short movie is, kind of enjoyable. You're in and out. It's kind of fun. So with all of that, our friend Val Lewton decided to recruit the efforts of director Jacques Tourneur and writer DeWitt Bodine. And those those three guys got together and wrote and created our feature for this week, and that is, of course, Cat People.
Across the centuries comes this exciting story of a modern girl cursed by an ancient legend. The legend of the Cat People. Women whose kiss means death, whose love turns them into vicious, snarling beasts of prey.
Twice I've been followed by something that was not human, something that attempted to take my life. I believe that was the cat form of Verena.
Why should she wish to harm you?
Because I'm in love with her husband. It's shut, Val. Just a minute ago, it was open.
It's locked.
Leave us, Verena.
The first of Val Lewton's horror films for RKO. This, of course, was released. This actually is a Christmas Day movie. This was released on Christmas Day, 1942. I wonder if we can count this as a Christmas movie. Of course.
It's a Zoom movie.
Yeah, hey, I'll go with that. Coming in just under the 75-minute limit at 1 hour and 13 minutes. It's currently sitting on a 7.2 rating, which is pretty high for a fantasy horror film. So let's see if it earns that. Our synopsis is as follows. An American man marries a Serbian immigrant who fears that she will turn into a cat person of her homeland's fables if they are intimate together. Pretty, simple setup. And like I said, nice short runtime. So, pacing for the most part shouldn't be an issue, but let's see what we thought about it. Let's go ahead and bring in Don. I know, Don, you were thinking about bringing this movie to the table before Mike and I started working on the next main show. So it kind of worked out. So I'm going to say this was your pick. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go first and ask, what are your general thoughts on 1942's Cat People?
All right. Well, I guess I might as well start at the beginning and get a little bit about why this one was one of my picks. So the original idea was February romance. Let's do like a creature romance kind of a movie. And after initially deciding that, okay, we've done Humanoids from the Deep. We can't really do any of the knockoffs because I don't really want to do fish rape. And the only other creatures that had a romance involved were leading me down very disturbing alleyways of research that I didn't want on my computer. I eventually decided on doing Cat People. I wasn't sure which one, if I wanted to do the original or the remake. And then once it was kind of sorted out that you guys were going to be doing the remake, it kind of made it simple for me to say, all right, well then fuck it. Let's just do the originals on Creature Comforts, and then we'll do the remakes on the main show. So yeah, this one was kind of one that I was leaning towards just because, again, the main figure in this one is the idea that the curse is triggered through, intimacy or romance kind of. So yeah, it kind of fit the bill on that front. So with that being said, my general thoughts, this is actually one of my favorites from the Val Lewton cycle. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of them. I do enjoy I Walk with a Zombie. I think that one's got its moments. I wouldn't say it's great. I enjoy, obviously, voodoo zombies of a different kind, but that'll be a discussion for a later day. Leopard Man feels very much like it's a knockoff of this kind of a movie. If you've seen it, you'll know. I don't want to spoil that one just because it's kind of obscure and not really too many know about it. And then, some of the other stuff that comes out, Body Snatchers, or, well, what's the other one? The Seventh Curse.
Isle of the Dead.
Isle of the Dead, yeah, that's the other one. And then, the final film, which is the sequel to this one, Curse of the Cat People. They kind of just feel a little too stiff for my taste. I actually really enjoy Cat People. I really like the way it kind of intertwines this mythology here. You get a little bit about who she is. You get her, background in, the Serbian folklore thing. It kind of just feels off enough to where it kind of differentiates itself from the Wolfman, where, they implore the gypsy relationship and, the full moon, the silver bullet, and all that kind of stuff. And then you get a little bit here from, how, her folklore talks about, her growing up in the village, how all of them are, based on marriage, how everything has to, follow the rules and, her relationship with her, boyfriend and all that kind of stuff. I really find that to be really intriguing. The second half feels a lot more noirish than the first half, which is, really kind of light and builds everything up. And then, it kind of goes really dark and disturbing on the finale. And you get kind of, we'll talk about it later, but then, the second act really kind of pulls everything together, and it really makes it really enjoyable. I do think it is kind of like with the others, it does feel a little stiff and sluggish at times. It really kind of feels low key to, I can tell that there's going to be some that are going to look at this and say, well, there's not much happening, but I really enjoy it. I really like the mindset that it employs here. Great use of shadow suggestion. It's a time period where you had to use that kind of stuff because you didn't have much else to work with. You had to, keep in mind that the censorships at the time, they didn't really let you go all out the way that a lot of other films would have. So, yeah, don't really want to say too much else, just to, give you guys a chance to say something. But, yeah, I really enjoy this one. Probably like towards the back end of like my favorite films from the 40s. Again, there's like a lot of Universal stuff on there, but this is one of the few non-Universal films that kind of cracks the list. So yeah, it's a fun time. Definitely has a lot to like. You can definitely see a lot of influences taken from this. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Derek, come on in here, brother. What do you got for your general thoughts on Cat People?
Okay, Cat People is what I would like to call as a psychological creature feature, in the sense where it's very suggestive. If there's actually things going on within the movie, we'll get into it a little bit more later, which I kind of like that aspect of it, where it actually, even now you say about the sequel that we probably will talk about later, that kind of like psychological aspect comes into even more play, especially with the plot of that movie. That's like a fucking giallo, that one. Jesus Christ, that ended. It fucking blew my mind the first time I saw that. Yeah, Jacques Tourneur, I love his films. It's very noirish because he's directed some of the best noir movies ever. Like Out of the Past is one movie that I watched a couple of years ago for the first time. Wow, that was a fucking great movie. Great filmmaking. And Val Lewin, I love all. Like, I used to watch these all the time at my aunt's place where she lived and shit. I Walk with a Zombie, I watched there on Turner Classic Movies, whatever it's on. I actually just got the 4K of that, which looks amazing. My favorite of the Val Lewin cycle, actually, weirdly, is one that Don mentioned, The Body Snatcher, because it's Boris Karloff, and there's this great scene in that movie where he chills with fucking Bela Lugosi, which it's one of the best scenes they ever acted together, and it's fucking awesome in that movie. Which, if you haven't seen it, watch it for that scene. Shout out to The Body Snatcher. Yeah, it's great. He got all these directors together, these early directors, where we wouldn't have Jacques Tourneur without Val Lewin, or even the editor of this movie, Mark Robson. He actually directed a bunch of the movies, Isle of the Dead, The Seventh Victim, Ghost Ship, and Bedlam. Bedlam was another Val Lewin movie. I actually own all these. It's crazy. These are all in physical media now. It's insane to say that. But Cat People, the first time I saw it, was a very interesting one. I love the aspect that this movie actually created the first jump scare. We'll get into that later. There's a great scene involving the main actress of the movie. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, the aspect of it, it's very psychological, very atmospheric. The thing I love about Val Luden's movies, all of them, even some of like the lesser ones, they always have great atmosphere. Like even the settings are cool. Like the zoo setting of this movie is pretty cool. Yeah, the aspect of it's being very psychological. Now, we might get into some disagreements if I get to rate this as a creature feature. It's very light on that aspect, and in that where you actually kind of don't actually get to really see. Well, maybe, but it's all in the mind and aspect of that. Where that's why I call it like a suggestive creature feature, because it's very psychological. And I kind of compare this movie to another movie that I've seen years ago called Werewolf Woman, where you think that this woman's turned into a werewolf, and it's like kind of like psychological in that aspect too, which are kind of cool, because either way, you're not fucking wrong, because that's what the film is meant to be discussed about. It because is it a creature feature? Is it not? In that aspect. If you're looking for something a little bit more creature heavy, you might be a little bit disappointed in this movie. It's not that type of movie. I love the Cat People. Like, I own the Criterion Blu-ray, so those are hit and miss sometimes, because some of those movies are not for everybody either. Yeah, Cat People. I enjoy it for what it is. It's a nice breezy like hour and 12 minutes, so you're not fucking losing any sleep in that aspect. But yeah, fucking great movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to make it 3 for 3. I absolutely love this film. Definitely not a first time watch this time around. I think the first time I saw this, I was a teenager, and I don't think I enjoyed it, if I remember correctly. I mean, ultimately, this is not a movie for a teenager. There's some themes here that maybe might go above the head of people of a certain age. So, but yeah, over the years, especially after seeing the remake, I started to develop more of an appreciation for this one. And now, in all honesty, I kind of prefer this one. I mean, I still love the remake. It's obviously more visceral. You actually get to see a little bit more since it's made in the 80s instead of the 40s. But I love the performances in this one. I mean, Simone Simon, I absolutely adore her in this film. Just her portrayal of this scared woman. There are issues that I have with some of her decision making. We'll get into that during the walkthrough. But yeah, just a great performance. I mean, ultimately, everybody in the movie, Kent Smith as Oliver Reed, I thought did a really great job. He kind of ends up being a little bit of an antagonist, but for the right reasons, if that makes sense. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Jane Randolph as Alice Moore, another great performance, very organic, believable as this third wheel in a marriage. But like I said, that we'll clear all that up when we get to the walkthrough. But yeah, I absolutely love this film. And yes, I agree with the statements that have been made already about the lack of a creature feature. Yes, you are correct. I mean, even for a 1940s movie, I mean, don't forget, our second episode was The Wolfman from 1941, and that is undeniably one of the best creature features out there. So yes, the creature feature action in this one is light, but it's all the implied stuff that makes this movie so great. I mean, there's multiple scenes here where we don't even see a panther. We might hear it, we might hear some growling, or we might hear some cracking twigs in the distance or something. But that tension, man, it just the tension. That bus stop scene is an incredibly tense scene. It just it's so well shot. The sound design, I mean, that's what really shines in that scene, is the sound design. This movie is first and foremost a film noir, and that's part of the reason why I fucking love it. The use of light and shadow in film noir, the use of distant shots, like, shots from a distance. There's a beautiful shot in this movie of Alice and Oliver working at night at their office, and the only light source is the light coming off of Oliver's desk, but it's a long shot, so it's showing, the entirety of the office and just this one desk shining in the foreground. That shot is amazing. And there's multiple shots shots like that in this movie. I mean, the pool scene, another incredibly intense scene that, is it horror? Is she a cat? I don't know. We haven't, you don't really find out until very, very late in the movie. And I like that aspect of it, I like the mystery of it. I like movies that keep me thinking, is this psychological? Is this all in Irina's head? Or is there something, tangible to this? Is there something physical? Is she correct? And I think that ultimately, whether Irina turns into a panther or not, her beliefs are valid. And that has more to do with some of the subtext in the film, which, we'll kind of get into a little bit later. But just what a beautiful film noir. Light on the horror, yes, but the scenes of horror that we get are really, really great. And like Derek already mentioned, our first cinematic jump scare in cinematic history. It was so lauded for what it was able to accomplish that for years it wasn't called a jump scare. It was called Luton's Bus. They literally named it after what creates the jump scare in this movie. So I just thought that was just a nice homage to him. And, the fact that he was able to do something that historic. I mean, it probably didn't seem like a big thing at the time, but I mean, hell, Blumhouse has made a living on jump scares. So, they definitely owe their thanks to Val Lewton.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into this story. I mean, it's not ultra deep or complex, but I do like how we, get into a little bit of backstory and history. I'll try to be as quick about this one as possible because we still have a lot of subtext that we need to talk about with this movie. So our movie opens up at the Central Park Zoo. That's another thing that I didn't mention about the RKO horror films. With the Universal horror films, they're all period pieces and they're all in foreign countries, Transylvania, Austria, Egypt, whatever the case may be. They very rarely take place in America. RKO purposely wanted all of their films to actually take place in modern times and in America. They thought that the horror of it all would seem a lot more realistic if it wasn't like a period piece where, obviously no one is scared of anything that happened in 1800s Wallachia. But if you're talking 1942 Central Park to 1942 audiences, yeah, that's legitimate, realistic, and terrifying. So that's why all of the RKO films, or at least the majority of them, take place in America and in modern times. So back to our story. Our movie opens up in Central Park. We see a Serbian-born fashion illustrator named Irina, and she's making sketches of a captive Black Panther that they have there at the zoo. She has some kind of fixation with this panther because throughout the film, we'll see her return to this same cage, this same set of Black Panther cages there. And eventually there will be a purpose to the visits, but we'll get to that in a little bit. She ends up catching the attention of a marine engineer named Oliver Reed. She tries to throw away a piece of paper from her sketchbook. She misses the trash can. He gives her like a, Hootie the Owl, give a hoot, don't pollute type speech to her, things like that. Oh, and they end up hitting it off right away, like really hitting it off. Like literally, like there wasn't even like a come on line or anything like that. Just out of nowhere, it's like, oh, you want to walk me home? Okay, let's go. It's pretty interesting. When they end up getting back to her house, she does end up inviting him in, and they end up again hitting it off, very, very well. But obviously, nothing physical happens, and there is a reason for that. We'll get to that in a little bit. Now, some people might be bothered by the time jumps in this movie because there's time jumps in this movie, but they don't tell you what they are. Because I can't imagine that Oliver and Irina got married after their first date. But the movie almost makes it seem like that. The timeline is a little different. There are times in the film where they'll say something like, oh, I've been married for a month, or, oh, we've known each other for a year. That gives you a little bit more idea of the timeline of this film. But yeah, sometimes how the passage of time might get a little confusing here. Has it been a day? Has it been a week? Has it been a year? We're not 100% sure. So just kind of go with it, obviously.
Yeah, it's 40s logic.
Exactly. Eventually, like I said, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Eventually, they fall in love and they do end up getting married. But after being married for a month, we find out that they have yet to be intimate. Like, they haven't even kissed yet, which is weird because I thought you had to kiss the bride at a wedding, but apparently you don't. On top of the fact that this guy literally married a woman who hasn't even kissed him yet, which even for 1942, that seems a little bit of a stretch for me. Yes, Arena's a beautiful girl. She's cute. She's got a bubbly personality. She seems like very accommodating. She wants to make Oliver happy, but obviously because of some of her beliefs, she can't. So it is the night of the reception dinner, the day before the wedding. And, all of Oliver's family is there. But of course, none of Urena's family is there because she's from Serbia and none of her family is in the States. She came out here by herself. Mm-hmm. At the rehearsal wedding, we see a mysterious blonde woman, beautiful European-looking blonde woman at the reception dinner. No one seems to know who she is. At one point, the Commodore, who is the father, Oliver Reed's father, they call him the Commodore for whatever reason. He makes a comment that she looks like a cat, and it's true. I mean, she kind of has the facial features. She has high cheekbones, then she has a bow in her hair. Yeah, she's got a bow in her hair that makes it look like cat ears almost. So it's kind of interesting when the Commodore says, "Oh, she looks like a cat." And then as the woman decides to get up and leave, she walks up to Urena, who's sitting there with all of Oliver's family, and she says one word in Serbian. And you see the expression, you basically see like the color drain out of, for a black and white movie, this is actually kind of impressive. You see the color drain out of Arena's face. She instantly becomes startled, and then the woman just leaves, unceremoniously. Oliver asks her, "Hey, what did she say to you? I mean, it was only one word. How could you be so freaked out?" As it turns out, the one word was a greeting, meaning sister. So basically, this woman is another of these Serbians from her village. Now, at one point in the movie, like I said, we do get a little bit of a backstory on her village. She comes from a small village in Serbia. At one point, because of the ruling class at the time, her local village had kind of lost touch with Christianity, and they started getting closer and closer with more dark forces, demonic forces, things like that, to the point where the whole village basically became a bunch of witches. Well, then there was the story of a king, King John of Serbia, who basically returned Christianity to the country. But at this point, the village members were so ingrained in, Satanism and the dark arts that they fled. They basically fought against King John and fled and didn't, want anything to do with him. Apparently, either there was a curse, like those people who abandoned Christianity ended up being cursed to the point where if they get intimate with anyone, they will turn into a large cat, specifically a Black Panther, and they will kill basically whoever is around. And there is some talk, like there was a little bit of talk in the backstory that it may not always necessarily be getting intimate. It could be fear. It could be adrenaline, that there's various reasons. Even jealousy is one of the things that they mention that could potentially make one of these people turn into a panther. So like I said, when Arena sees this crazy woman, this strange woman call her sister and then walk out, I think Arena knows that, oh shit, they know that potentially I'm obviously about to marry someone.
She's about to Wakanda forever.
Exactly. She's about to go crazy. So Oliver, obviously, and credit to Oliver. I don't usually give a lot of credit to spouses in horror films, but this movie takes place in 1942, and Oliver was very okay with sending his wife to therapy. I mean, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, men would never, ever want to admit that their wives needed therapy because that would look like a slight on them. But Oliver, he was like, yeah, I think you should go to therapy, like right away. And, I almost gave a little golf clap because I was kind of impressed. A 1942 husband who's that okay with sending his wife to therapy. I like that. As it turns out, there's a little bit of an ulterior motive for the sending her to therapy. As it turns out, Oliver and his coworker Alice have a burgeoning romance. Nothing that Oliver intended to happen. It's not like he cheated on Arena. It's just that with them working together so closely, being very similar in personality and, things like that, Alice just ended up falling in love with him. And when she gives the admission in the film that she's in love with him, Oliver kind of makes the realization that, I've kind of always been in love with you too, and I don't know why we never acted on it, and now it's too late because I'm married to Arena. But of course, at this point, they've been married for a couple of months. They haven't even kissed yet, my friends. They probably don't even sleep in the same room, in the same bedroom. So obviously, the allure of maybe going with Alice is, it's kind of strong for Oliver. Get rid of this woman who doesn't want to be intimate with him because she's so scared that she's going to end up killing her husband. Like throughout the film, when Arena describes the curse, she doesn't say that she's going to turn into a cat. Her exact words are, if I get intimate with someone, I will attack them and kill them. Those are her exact words. So obviously the title of the movie kind of gives away how she's doing it. And we do get a great scene in the film of a Black Panther actually stalking a couple outside of Central Park. And it comes so early in the film that it's like, you don't know if this is Arena or if this is one of the Panthers from the zoo that maybe escaped, because obviously we've already seen multiple Panthers at the zoo because of Arena's, multiple visits there. So eventually Arena kind of starts to put two and two together that Oliver might be developing feelings for Alice. So one night when Oliver calls her and says that he's not coming home from work right away, that he's, got some extra stuff to do or whatever, she decides to go follow him. As it turns out, he left work and he went to a restaurant. By the way, did you notice that this guy eats apple pie multiple times in this movie? Oliver is so fucking American that all he eats in this film is apple pie. I found that kind of funny. It's like he's trying to hold on to his American, like his patriotism, because he's married to a Serbian woman, obviously, and a crazy Serbian woman at that. So I don't know. I just kind of found it funny that I think Oliver would be a Trump supporter. That's just my guess.
Yeah, Ariana is definitely Milana.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so like I said, Arena follows Oliver to a restaurant. He's there by himself. But then after a few minutes, Alice ends up joining him. It was not planned. It's not like they had a date or anything. Alice just decided to stop in the restaurant, at the same restaurant that he stopped in, to grab a drink and a bite to eat. They end up sitting at the same table. Of course, Arena sees this and thinks that, that they had set up a date and that he's lying, that Oliver's lying to her about, having to work late and that he's actually spending his time with Alice. They end up getting up. Alice and Oliver end up leaving the restaurant. They end up walking together until it's time to go their separate ways. Alice lives down one path at the park and Oliver lives down another way. Oliver, of course, asks if, Alice wants him to walk her home. Alice, of course, says, no, I'm a big girl. I've walked this way home countless times. I'm fine. Of course, on this night, though, Arena decides to follow Alice. And this is where we get the first true horror scene of this movie. And with some beautiful, beautiful sound design, the sound of the heels of their high heel shoes clicking, both Alice's shoes and Arena's shoes clicking loudly in the darkness. It's so well done. I really, really enjoyed it. And, being a sound engineer, I noticed sound design right away. So yeah, definitely some well done work there. Now, eventually, the camera loses sight of Arena and Alice knows that she's being followed. She keeps turning around. She hears that someone is following her. She can't see anyone. After the camera loses sight of Arena, this is where we start to get cat sound effects, like growling, like panther growling. The other thing that they show us is they show Arena's footsteps. Now, it was a wet night. It looks like it had rained, so they're leaving wet footsteps behind. We see Arena's footsteps go from stiletto heels to cat paws very slowly. We don't see a cat in this scene. We don't see a transformation. all we see are those footsteps. So again, they're kind of putting the ideas in your head of, what might actually be happening here. And then once Alice gets to the bus stop, she starts to hear rustling in the trees behind her. We start to hear the music start to swell up, but then it cuts out completely and it's totally silent. And we think that we're about to get an attack scene, that, a Black Panther is about to jump out of these bushes at Alice. No, instead a city bus comes by, stops at the bus stop, and you know how those old buses had like those loud air brakes, those hissing air brakes. That sound effect plays and it scares the shit out of Alice, and I'm sure most of the audience as well, because it did get me. The first time I watched it, it got me. I absolutely, I jumped. I'll admit it. I don't care.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And yeah, like I said, that is the first official cinematic jump scare, in the sense that it's not a creature jumping out at someone. It's like a fake out. So it's like the first, fake out jump scare, in cinematic history. So and like I said, Hollywood loved it so much that they dubbed it the Luton Bus for years and years, until they came up with the term jump scare, which it'll take a smarter man than me to figure out where that term came from. For years, they called it the Luton Bus. So again, a nice homage to producer Val Luna. After this scene, once again, we get Alice and Oliver having another heart-to-heart talk, and this is where Oliver admits that he might be developing feelings for Alice. Irina obviously doesn't take it very well. She doesn't necessarily storm off. She just kind of goes to her bedroom and says, I want to be alone, blah, blah, blah. The next night, we get another really cool little horror stalking scene where we see Irina once again following Alice out of work. This time, she follows Alice home to her apartment building, and in the apartment building, they have a pool. Obviously, Alice is going to go swimming, and of course, Irina shows up at the front desk asking where Alice Moore could be. The receptionist lets her know, oh, she just went down to the pool. It's right down that hallway. And then we get a great scene where the lights in the pool area go off with Alice in the pool. Very reminiscent of It Follows. I'm not sure if It Follows ripped off this scene, but it's kind of reminiscent. Lights go out. Yeah. Lights go out. And Alice is in the middle of the pool, and of course she hears a combination of heels clicking and cat growls, panther growls. She's looking around. Eventually she starts screaming for help. Luckily the pool is close enough to the front desk that they can hear her. So she starts screaming for help. The staff show up at the pool, and at that exact moment that the staff show up, the lights come on, and Alice basically pretends that, she wasn't, not Alice, excuse me, that Irina pretends that she wasn't just stalking Alice and actually says, have you seen Oliver? Under the guise of the worried wife looking for her husband. Alice lets her know that, no, I don't know where he is. He must have gone home. I haven't seen him since he left work, or blah, blah, blah. And Irina, of course, puts on a fake smile and says, oh, thank you. I'll just go home and see if I can find him there. But after Irina leaves and the staff leaves, Alice she comes out of the pool and she grabs her robe, and her robe has been just tattered. It looks like an animal. It looks like a fucking bear, actually. Just tattered the shit out of it. Just left it in just strips of fabric. And so, of course, we're getting more and more confirmation that potentially Irina might be correct in her fear of what might happen. Eventually, Oliver and Irina basically just go their separate ways, and they don't officially say that they're going to split up and divorce, but
they split up and divorce.
What ends up happening is the psychiatrist, in conjunction with Oliver and Alice, decide that they're going to commit Irina. Not that Irina's done anything wrong at this point. They're literally just going to commit her because she thinks that she might be a danger to her loved ones. The psychiatrist comes up with a great plan. He decides he's going to tell Oliver and Alice to leave, go to Alice's place, because they'll probably be safer there, and he stays at Irina and Oliver's house. Eventually, Irina shows up. The doctor is there basically saying, do you still believe that you're going to turn into some kind of thing and attack the person that you're intimate with? Irina, of course, is still adamant that yes, that is the curse that's been placed on my people. And eventually the doctor basically decides to test the theory, and he lays a big old kiss on her. What's funny is that Arena's eyes never close. Like, there's no intimacy to this kiss whatsoever. Arena has no feelings for this guy whatsoever. He just lays an unwanted kiss on her, and yep, exactly what we think is going to happen happens. She ends up transforming. Now, this, unfortunately, it's not on screen. We basically end up seeing an image of Arena start to darken. You know, it just starts to get darker and darker and darker. And then eventually we see a shadow of a Black Panther in the room with the doctor. Of course, the Panther attacks the psychiatrist and kills him instantly. That's the end of our psychiatrist. After that, Arena realizes that she's kind of done for. You know, she's not going to be able to get away. She has no friends in the city. She can't get back home to Serbia. So basically, she decides to go back to the zoo, and using a key that she had stolen from the zookeeper earlier in the film, she befriends the zookeeper there at Central Park because of all the visits that she makes to the Black Panther exhibit. Eventually, he ends up leaving the key in the lock one day. She ends up just taking it. Not sure why. At the time, I think that, we're all thinking that maybe she's just going to release that cat just to be spiteful and watch it just decimate random people, or that it was going to turn out that this really was a straight psychological thriller and that all the attacks weren't actually Arena. They were this panther that she keeps releasing. Obviously a little bit of a stretch, but what are you going to do? So anyway, after Arena kills the psychiatrist, she goes back to the zoo. Using the key that she stole from the zookeeper, she opens the cage to the Black Panther, and the Black Panther unceremoniously leaps at her, swipes at her in the head neck area, basically killing Arena instantly. Unfortunately, you might be thinking, well, what happened to the Panther? Unfortunately, the Panther jumps the fence at the zoo, and literally as soon as he jumps the fence, he ends up getting hit by a truck right there, right after he jumps over the fence, killing the Panther. And the final image that we get in the film is just, dead Arena and the dead Panther both in the street. And that is Cat People 1942, my friends. Like I said, I kind of rushed through it. I skipped a lot of, some of the good dialogue scenes, because there are, this is a very dialogue heavy film, not a lot of stalking or horror scenes to be had, like two major ones, and then, that little bit of a confrontation at the end there.
And then most of the movie's like, listen here, Alice, we're in a bang.
Yeah. Most of the movie is very Humphrey Bogart, fast talking, film noir awesomeness, which is part of the reason that I absolutely love this film. It's just so much fun to watch. Film noir in general for me is very just fun to watch. There doesn't even have to be a lot of action. I could just sit there and watch those guys fast talk for hours. It's so entertaining to me.
Oh yeah.
All right. I don't know. I think I'll turn it over to my co-host to ask them. Obviously, we all have kind of lamented that there wasn't a lot of creature action in this, but let me ask Don first. What would you have liked to have seen in here? Like, what do you think would have helped the actual creature feature aspect of the film?
If we would have seen either in the scene where she's stalking the girl through the park, or the encounter at the pool, if we physically see the shadow transform either like on the wall,
that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying, if she walks up to her and we see that it's physically her, like she has the conversation, and then we see the shadow on the wall physically change. Even if she turns away and doesn't see it, we, the audience, see it. So
I like it.
Yeah, like I'm saying, is that if she turns away to continue her laps, and we see the shadow on the wall, the shadow turns from her as a person into her as a cat, and then the cat walks away to fiddle with her bags. Or even if we see her turning from the cat into Arena, and then she comes in and has the conversation. So she's already physically destroyed her things, but she's just doing it to toy with her.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, obviously, since it's 1942, you're not going to do too much with viscera. Obviously, the style of horror, the more noir, gothic style, You're not going to have too many actual on-screen animal attacks. I mean, we actually get that one scene with the couple getting stalked by the panther early on, which is actually a pretty cool little scene too. Derek, anything else you want to add to that? Anything else you would have liked to have seen to make this a little bit more creature feature-y?
Yeah, honestly, like whatever Don said, that would have been perfect, to be honest with you. Like, this movie's not that type of movie because it is that thing where it suggests, is this real or is it not? It actually kind of even plays more in the more psychological sequel where Robert Wise directed that one, where it's fucking, actually it's kind of cool because, spoiler alert, a lot of the characters from this movie actually do come back in that movie.
Mhm.
Like, there's returning characters and stuff where this movie actually goes pretty well with its sequel if you watch them back to back, which I actually did. In that sense, where
Mhm.
they mind fuck movies, they fucking fuck with your mind. But overall, like the aspects that Don mentioned, if it was played more as a straightforward creature feature, I would have loved to see. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the subtext of this film because there's one very specific theme that movie reviewers have kind of gravitated towards when it comes to this movie. And that is the quote-unquote cat transformation in this film is actually a metaphor for homosexuality. Now, the running theory is that Irina was actually an unknowing lesbian, not a closeted one. It's not that she knew she was gay, just that she maybe had an inclination. Think about it. A lot of people make the argument that the fact that she can change into a cat during the two scenes where she's stalking Alice kind of alludes to the fact that it's not necessarily that she's jealous of Alice, it's that she's jealous of Oliver because Irina actually is developing feelings for Alice. Now, mind you, this is a running theory that's been discussed ad nauseum on the internet and in different review shows. Whether I agree with it or not, I'm still kind of on the fence because obviously that theme didn't scream out to me the first few times that I saw this, but obviously after you hear some movie reviewers talk about some of the scenes in the movie kind of alluding more to the fact not that she turns into a creature or the reason that she's fearful of kissing and being intimate with her husband isn't that she's going to turn into a cat, it's that she's not going to like it and that she's not going to be able to be a good wife to this man because there's even a conversation in the movie where Irina talks about her dream is to just be a normal woman, a normal good wife who could provide a good life for her husband. Well, yes, that kind of alludes to being a cat person, but it also kind of alludes to being a lesbian because a lesbian can't make her husband happy, can't be a normal wife, things like that. So I definitely found it interesting. Whether I agree with it or not is up in the air. So let me bring Derek in here. Derek, I mean, have you heard of these themes and do you agree with them? What do you think of them?
For the time period that this movie came out in, it's very suggestive that was the case, especially in some aspects of the way that she views Alice as a character in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of find interesting when they do have scenes together. Kind of tough, like if I didn't know that and you told me, then I've been like, oh yeah, I've been reading about it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's like the whole thing where they make suggestive things where it's the same aspect of those fucking crazy conspiracy theories of something like Room 237 where they ask look at this as an early example of lesbianism. They say the same thing about fucking Invisible Man, the Leela and Well movie, being a Me Too movie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same. Yeah, go ahead.
We've kind of heard the same thing even with Bride of Frankenstein and Dr. Pretorius, that potentially he's a gay character who's actually in love with Dr. Frankenstein. I mean, obviously they don't address that in the film, but people have kind of put pieces together and, kind of figured that out. Or, well, whether they're accurate or not is obviously up in the air. But of course, with the director of that film, James Whale, being a homosexual man, obviously there's credit to that theory. So, Don, same question. I mean, have you ever watched Cat People and thought that this was a lesbian allegory?
Not as much. I believe it more in the Universal ones, especially with Dracula's daughter. I mean, that thing is like it's so coded, it's practically dripping off the screen. This one, I would understand it more if there was more interactions with other people. Like if she stalked other people or other women that she thought were trying to steal her husband, then maybe, I mean, it could hold a little more credence. I mean, she does kind of downplay the kiss with the psychiatrist, so I mean, that one there, you could probably read it, but I mean, it was also one of those where he sprung it on her so quickly, like she didn't have time to react. It's not one that I dismiss, like a lot of like like what Derek said, like a lot of the, room 237 stuff. I mean, there is some here. I don't know if there's enough for me to say that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what they were going with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like if there was maybe like a receptionist or something that was friendly with him at where he worked, and she kind of did that to like scare him away, then you could probably have enough to like say, okay, it's her being the lesbian trying to like shoo away the attractive girls to get him for herself. But
yeah, it's not like the fucking remake that has full blown incest in it.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, there's just not enough here. I mean, you've got only one character that she interacts with in any kind of way where she's trying to like actively turn into a cat person. If there was, like I said, if there was like a receptionist or maybe like somebody at his apartment that where he lived before they got married, that she kind of acted the same way towards, I could see it maybe being coded a little bit. But I mean, there's just not enough here. I believe it a little bit more than some of the other conspiracy theories, but I don't read it that way.
I did also read that the scene at the reception dinner with the other Serbian woman kind of made people think that there were lesbian overtones, because just the seductive way that she looked at Irina and just said sister in Serbian, that maybe she wasn't necessarily saying, sister like we're related, but, sister like you and I could be together because we're both the same thing.
By the way, Serbia is a fucked up country, man.
Yeah. Oh,
they are cat people and fucking
many examples coming out of Serbia as to that country maybe not being the best place to visit, despite its history and architecture and beauty and everything. Yeah, cinema definitely doesn't want us to go to Serbia for some reason.
Yeah.
Oh man. And then I guess the last thing I'll say about the film is, still sticking to the topic at hand. This is a very deep topic. This is something that can be discussed for hours and hours and hours. And ultimately, the three of us all have a penis. So maybe we're not the right people to dissect this movie as far as it being a allegory for lesbianism. So I would ask if we have any female listeners, any females that might be listening to us, what do you think of cat people? Do you see this as a lesbian allegory? Do you not see it? Like, I'd be very curious to see what some of our female listeners might think, and even, other female podcasters that maybe we work with. Same thing. I would love to hear what they might have to say about this. But yeah, definitely a topic that we could probably discuss and dissect for hours, but we're kind of coming up on our time here. So
Cat People Part 2 coming soon.
Oh yeah, look out for the review of the remake. And of course, Don will be joining us on that main show so that you'll get all of Don's thoughts on the OGs and of course the remake. So we'll have the whole family together. And like I said, I'll make sure that Mike Merriman joins us for the next episode of Creature Comfort. But yeah, we'll get his thoughts on the original Fly, and then maybe I'll give him 5 minutes to talk about this film since he wasn't able to join us for this episode, just so that it kind of comes full circle and you'll know all four of our thoughts on both the originals and the remakes. And then the last little fact that I have for this movie is that this was the #1 highest grossing movie for RKO in 1942. So obviously with the success of this movie, both critically and financially, RKO definitely thought that they had, the chops to kind of go up against Universal. Obviously that idea kind of fizzled out after about a decade or so, but they still gave us some great movies. Val Lewton specifically, through his run with RKO, gave us some really, really enjoyable movies. I actually haven't seen the sequel to this one, Curse of the Cat People. So if we do that on this show, that'll be a first time watch for me. So I'll be kind of interested to see.
To be fair, it's kind of less of a creature feature than this one.
Oh, even less.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe we'll just kind of talk about it in passing one day rather than make it our feature review. But yeah. So that's it, folks. That is what we have for Cat People 1942. And that'll do it for episode 35 of Creature Comforts. Thanks to Derek and Don for chiming in with all their great feedback. And yeah, I really like talking about this one. This is a movie that I've enjoyed for well over 40 years and, watch it at least every, like maybe 2, 3, 4 years or so. Really, really enjoy it. More about the characters than obviously the creature action. But if you haven't seen it, go check it out and, hit us up. Let us know what you thought about it. Obviously, watching a 1942 movie for the first time in 2025 might not translate to a good time for some horror and thriller fans, but I would still be really curious to hear what people think about this one, both first-time watchers and long-time fans. So I guess I'll just leave it at that and say that on behalf of Derek B. and Don Anelli, this is Mr. Venom saying thank you all so much for joining us for No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts, episode 35. We'll see you next month when we talk about all things flies and spider webs and everything else.
Vincent Price.
And Vincent Price, yes. Even though there might not be enough Vincent Price in The Fly for some people, it's still a nice little amount. So, yeah, that'll be fun. So let's go ahead and say bye to the folks, and we'll see you next month for The Fly.
Bye.
Later.
Bye. Bye.
Take care, folks. Help me. Take care.
These eyes so green, I can stare for 1,000 years, colder than the moon. It's been so long. Feel my blood enraged. It's just the fear of losing you. Don't you know my name? Well, you've been so long. And I've been put